We are live.
Well, all right, we're live.
Hi, everyone. My name's Roxanne Nazario, and we do have a host here, Leticia. I'm going to let her jump in just a moment and introduce us so we can get started. But she might be having a couple technical difficulties, but we're here today to continue our conversation about schools reopening. We thought it was a good idea to come back and revisit this, especially since, this is really a fluid conversation and things are changing every moment. So we wanted to continue that conversation with you about schools reopening and what that might look like. And Bobby Joe.
I'm not.
There you go.
I'm not sure if you guys can see me, but I'm here for now. I'm having technical difficulties again. So really quickly, I want to introduce everyone to a friend of mine, my bestie. This is Bobby Joe. And Bobby Joe has 2 children. And because of what the governor has come out in his guidelines for reopening schools on Friday at noon, he held a conference. And so we are going to be starting school in most of the counties in California remotely or online, as you probably finished in your county. And the reason I brought Bobby Joe in is because she actually voluntarily on her own started small children from kindergarten virtual education. So I wanted to get her perspective on what the challenges were and how that worked out. And then we'll talk more about what it will take to get our schools physically reopened and kids being back on campus. So I don't know, Roxanne, really quickly, do you want to just break down to folks listening what the mandate is in terms of how we can get schools open?
Yeah, there's a list of counties that the governor announced on Friday would not be able to open schools on campus starting next month, which is when most schools would return. I think we do have a list of those counties, and we might be able to post that in the comments in a few moments. But one of the counties that was interesting is that Orange County was on the list. Their Board of Education just voted that they were going to fully open schools and campuses with masks and social distancing being optional. And so now with this new mandate, they're not going to be able to do that since the governor is coming in and saying these particular counties cannot open because of their numbers. Several of the large counties are on there, Los Angeles, Ventura County, but really all across the state. But the one that really caught my attention was Orange County, simply because their Board of Education had already stepped up and said, can you put on mute? There you go. Got a little bounce. There we go. And so anyway, so that should be interesting down there, what happens in Orange County and several other counties across. But the mandate was not saying that schools wouldn't be able to open their campuses the entire year. At some point, hopefully they can, but it is a matter of getting our numbers under control, getting our protocols, safe and under control before we can, a lot of us parents can feel safe about opening up schools and sending our kids back on campus. But yeah, we can talk about that a little bit more, but I'll let Bobby Joe go ahead and introduce herself a little bit and talk about her educational experience.
So, hey, thank you so much for the invite. I have 2 children. One is heading into 6th grade and the other is heading into 3rd grade. So as Leticia mentioned, when we first started school, both boys, we had them in the California Virtual Academy for kindergarten, and Ethan, kindergarten and 1st grade. And then he went to a Montessori school for 2nd grade, and then finally into public schools in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. But we went to a neighboring school district so that he would be in joining the curriculum that was being offered there, which is the IB IB, it is an IB World School that had been certified for now 10 years, something like that. And then our youngest, first year again in kindergarten, and then he joined Ethan at the IB school in our neighboring school district. We're neighboring. I live in Fontana, and the boys attend school in the Ontario Montclair School District. So, I mean, the decision to start virtually really was just my understanding of what it's like to be a 5, 6, 7-year-old who's kind of intelligent, kind of precocious, and being forced to sit, follow rules, do that for an extended period of time without primary caregivers being anywhere in the vicinity. And then that they were 2 boys, both of them also probably identified as, or could be identified as, maybe a little ADHD, and then as boys of color, also whatever negative connotations that could be sometimes in the classroom. Here in Fontana, Leticia was a school board member, but I think the statistic was the overwhelming majority of boys, by the time they went through 6th grade, had already had interaction with some kind of disciplinary form in one way or another before they even hit middle school. So I wanted my boys to avoid that as well. And then now all this gets exacerbated, right, in an era of pandemic, where, my husband and I always talked about, getting sick at the beginning of every school year, just from whatever viruses and colds were going around. Whenever we went to visit family on the weekends, we could expect to be sick by Tuesday or Wednesday of the following week, because boys and girls who are, under 10 years old don't always, they're just kids. They don't have the sort of like, hand washing, awareness of like how many times they touch their face or who else touched something ever. So when the pandemic happened and was announced in March, it was a real
Might have frozen for a minute there. You there, Bobby Joe? Oh, reloading there. Yeah, it looks like we might have frozen there. Hopefully they'll be able to come back. One thing I wanted to mention while we're waiting is, I have talked many times about being in the LAUSD school district and being a parent in the school district and what that's like. I'm also a parent organizer with an organization called Speak Up, where I organize parents. And one thing I wanted to kind of ask people about too, since I have this moment while we're having technical difficulties, is if parents would be interested in taking some kind of action in person. So right now, UTLA is negotiating, the teachers union in Los Angeles is negotiating with the superintendent and the LAUSD board. And sorry, I'm sidetracking for a moment, Leticia. And there's a group of parents that want to hold a protest outside of LAUSD headquarters in downtown LA. And I can share more information on that in a moment while we're waiting for Bobby Joe to come back. But what I wanted to ask, and if people want to comment, leave anything in the comment, is that something you would be interested in? Are parents interested in, getting out of the house and taking some kind of action to make sure that parent voices are heard? So, negotiations are happening right now, and there's a lot of parents who want to make sure that what happened in the spring with distance learning doesn't happen again in the fall. We want to have much clearer guidelines and recommendations around teaching and what's really going to be required. There's a group of parents called Concerned Parents of Los Angeles. They're a group of parents that are advocating for very specific things, including that all of the core classes be taught live. So your core classes, English, math, science, and history, they want at least an hour of live teaching. If that sounds like something that other parents, are looking to find and have as well, this might be something that you're interested in. So if anybody's interested and might want to take some action, specifically if you're within the LA Unified School District, let me know in the comments, and I can share some more information with you on that. So it looks like, Leticia, you're back, but Bobby Joe's connection is still struggling. Yeah. So I have plenty of other things.
We don't have very good, obviously, we don't have strong Wi-Fi. But you know what? This just goes to show what kinds of things can happen when kids are trying to, go to school online. These things happen all the time. So unfortunately, there are areas in San Bernardino County that the Wi-Fi signal is not always as good as we'd like it to be. But
I understand. My area too.
Yeah, and that is an issue that we have. Some of the other issues that have come up after we made the decision in March to go online. Mm-hmm. And Roxanne, you were actually a huge part of delivering headphones to kids in the Valley where you live. And let's talk about that, all the things that are needed for kids to go online and be successful. It's more than just the laptop.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's great, actually, that we are having these internet challenges right now, just so that people can see what our kids are dealing with when they're trying to go online. We're all in different places, but imagine when multiple kids are trying to go online in one household. At the organization I work with, Speak Up, we have parents who have 3, 4, 5 kids, in one maybe small house or a small apartment, depending on the setup. And so it's hard to hear your teacher or the lessons that are taking place if you're in a small space with a lot of other people. So one thing Speak Up did in the very beginning of the pandemic was we joined a coalition of organizations that was called One Family LA. And we were able to help families with some other things as well, with paying rent and groceries, transportation, healthcare. But in addition, we got a donation of Beats headphones from Beats by Dre. So they were really nice headphones, and it was really nice for the kids. And just to be able to have something that maybe a lot of lower income families may not be able to afford. And so I was personally able to deliver 5 of these headphone sets to families here in the Northeast Valley where I live, along with my colleagues who work in South LA and Southgate and Huntington Park area. And they were able to deliver headphones to many families down there. And it made a huge difference. We got, lots of thank yous from different people. There we go.
There we go.
There we go. Yeah, it's okay. I was just talking about headphones and how it's really important, one, to have a strong internet connection, right? As we all just experienced, because these are the things that happen, And 2, even if you have that strong internet, connection, if you're in a 2-bedroom or 1-bedroom apartment with 6, 7 other family members, it's really hard for you to be able to hear your lessons or your teacher, giving instructions while you're doing learning at home. So we were delivering headphones to families throughout LA. Some of them were Beats by Dre. I kind of regretted posting that on social media afterwards, because then I got flooded with requests for more Beats by Dre headphones. And we did end up getting another donation, but they weren't the same brand. But either way, they were still really good. They were actually kind of gaming headphones. So some of the kids were excited about that. My daughter wanted a pair, but I was like, no, we got to give these to people who really, really are in need. So, that's essential. And LAUSD, has been bragging about giving out headphones, but they're headphones like this, like the little plug-in ones, and they don't drown out the sound.
They need the actual headphones.
Exactly. So the ones we gave out were sound canceling that did cover your ears rather than just these little plugins, which are nice, but at the same time, they're not going to drown out everything going around you. So these are the different things that we have to consider when we're talking about distance learning, especially with families who are going to need the most support.
Yeah, I think that it's the thing that was not considered. Well, and again, it was an emergency situation, and I hope that some of these things will be addressed when kids go back in August. But definitely, I think the kids need a laptop, the headphones. They do need a printer, especially in high school, because some of the stuff that kids are doing in math in high school, sometimes it's easier to do on a sheet of paper to show your work, and then either send it in or copy it in or print it and then take a picture of it. So I do think they do need printers. I know, Bobby, when you had your kids in the virtual academy, they provided everything that you needed, right, in terms of tech.
Right. We had a laptop, we had the microphone and headset, a printer, and a printer with a scanner was also real important so that we could scan in work to return back to the teacher. And then we were also given complimentary workbooks that went along with the lessons, so that if there was hand things to be done, or or worksheets to be done, that you could do when you were offline, because part of the convenience of being in the virtual academy is that we weren't nailed to a desk for 6 or 7 hours a day, but then that meant being able to access your work offline anywhere. So that was also,
So
I don't know, yeah, we haven't even heard
very helpful.
even having an in-hand textbook, especially because some kids are hands-on learners. They
Yes.
actually need something in front of them, and the screen is not enough. It's not tactile enough to get certain lessons. So yeah, and then with Ezra, that it was actually working on the on-screen that helped me, only because I was aware, helped me identify that he was red-green colorblind deficient. So much of, as we're discovering, some of the coursework is not accessible to him, where he does need me to sit next to him sometimes and help identify colors or read certain things that might not be visible to him.
Yeah, and so one of the biggest challenges that our families are going to be facing with the online schooling is that a lot of parents work full time and they do not have the ability to be at home and monitor the kids. I think that's going to be a huge issue for a lot of families, especially when you have smaller children, in kindergarten through 5th grade. So what do you guys think about that challenge, and how do you see your districts or yourselves addressing that if you have to work full time and you don't have someone to monitor the kids in school?
That's a challenge even for me. Sorry, I'll just real quickly. That's a challenge even for me. So, I'm a single mother. I have one daughter. She's going into 7th grade. She prefers to be at home. She doesn't miss school at all, but she's not, I know not all kids are like that, but a lot of kids are similar like her, where they get a lot of anxiety going to school. So when she found out she didn't have to go, she was great. She was more than happy to be in her room. But at the same time, I still have to be able to monitor that she's doing her work. Now, I am still working full time from home, which thankfully I can do, and I'm very grateful to be in that position. But if she gets stuck on something like in math and she can't move forward, she has to wait for me to be able to help her. And I may not be done with phone calls and meetings until 5, 6, 7 o'clock sometimes, depending. And then we don't get to go back and look at her math homework or whatever it may be that she had a challenge with. So even just with one child and a parent home, it can be hard.
And just so people know, your daughter Scarlett is actually in middle school.
Mm-hmm.
So, because there's, different age groups, obviously, that have different needs. But so she's in middle school, just to be clear.
Yes, she is. She's going into 7th grade. This will be her 2nd year of middle school, and she spent the first half of her year, at home. So it's interesting. Yeah.
Well, I think it's for us, it's really the convenience again of sort of being able to not sit and spend a lot of time doing busy work, especially in the early grades for my boys who did, catch on to reading and writing and math stuff pretty quickly. But the time that it takes to like get them into something that they're interested in and actually be a part of the coursework that's in front of them, like that, it's a full, it really is a full-time job that is, that I'm not trained for. I mean, as much as I know stuff, like how to interest them, how to keep them engaged, how to make an activity fun, or like that takes time to like plan and think about. And if you're working outside of the home or inside of the home, that is time that most parents just do not have.
Yeah.
Because they're also still maintaining a household in whatever that means, right? So the regular chores, the regular errands that need to be run, the bills that need to be paid. And the governor with this mandate I haven't seen the additional allocation of funding for what they have been putting as paid family leave. But if I got laid off from my full-time job outside of the home, but if I'm going to be required to take a job and still teach my children and still and my husband's still working outside of the home, that just, it doesn't add up. So
Right. That's a good point. Really, really good point. Yeah. And
yeah,
parents
unless we
need
have
to work.
Unless we have the kids kind of take a second shift, they're working their overtime.
Yeah, they are overtime, definitely.
That is the thing and your schedule with an online school is a little more flexible than maybe what the governor is proposing, because there are some accountability features for teachers. School districts actually, they do have to have I think it's like 280 hours, right, Roxanne?
I think it's 240 minutes is what is being talked about. So 4 hours a day.
So they have to at minimum do that 4 hours. And so it's not necessarily going to be during a time when parents are home from work. It's going to be when they're not, more than likely. So there are some definite challenges about, implementing this and how kids can still continue to learn and thrive. I feel bad for so many parents that don't have the ability to be home, especially when you have kids that are 5 and 6 years old. This is their first year in school, second graders, because we all know that K-3 foundation is what makes or breaks how you do throughout the rest of your educational career. This is where you learn everything. You learn the foundation. This is where you learn what you need to learn. And so it's going to be really tough for folks who have small children. I know my sister's going through that because she has one in starting kindergarten, and then she has a high schooler and a middle schooler and one in TK. So it's all over the place. And how do you make it all happen? And especially, in a smaller home where you have to share, the area and stuff. So Roxanne and I were talking before we went on about pods and communities are building. But before we go into that, if you wanted to say something, Bobby?
Yeah, well, I actually this probably is the transition that you're looking for, because I was thinking when we talked sometime last year where that this all was going to have everyone seriously rethinking what public education looked like. So what does that look like? Because I know for me, we've experimented with all different aspects of what education looks like for our boys, and I don't always feel that it's the options that we had served them. You know, Ezra, the younger one, there was two things right towards the end of when they were still going to school. So like the end of February, he made a comment about how he doesn't really eat his lunch. And I said, well, why not? And he said, well, there's no time. Because by the time we get in there and sitting down and like talking with my friends, then it's time to go outside. And he's not allowed to take his food outside. So he just doesn't eat. And then, you know, of course, by the end of the day, he's like super hungry. But also that this conversation was happening.
She looks like she might have froze again.
That is actually, yeah, that's a problem with a lot of kids. And you know that in middle schools, it's a huge problem. I know when I was a teacher, my kids, you know, they would come back to class and they hadn't eaten their entire lunch, and most teachers would make them throw it away.
You know, it's so funny that she brought that up, because my daughter has told me too that she doesn't eat lunch, but on top of that, ever since she started middle school, she doesn't use the bathroom. She has not used the bathroom one time on campus because she doesn't feel comfortable. And this is at an all-girls school, but it's an all-girls middle school that's co-located at a high school. And even though they have their own floor and their own separate space, she still doesn't feel comfortable. I learned this right before schools closed. And so when they ended up closing, because we had talked about homeschooling before, I was like, well, we're going to have the opportunity to give this a try and see how it goes and see how you like it. And that's another reason why she's just more comfortable being at home. But
so there are, so many challenges for kids.
Eating lunch, going to the bathroom. Yeah, those are basic things that kids need to be able to have the time to do it and to feel comfortable to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Basics.
Now, in Bobby's situation, she may have mentioned it, but at the time when her kids started school, they've had their home for like 25 years. They live in a really nice area. It's a really nice neighborhood. It's decent, right? And they paid property taxes for many years. But when it was time to enroll them in school, their school, which is literally a block away, was just an unacceptable place to put her kids. It was so low performing, one of the lowest still after all these years, 10 years, one of the lowest performing schools in the Inland Empire. And so she and her kids were her oldest one is very bright, and we talked about it, and I encouraged her to look at other options because, you know, he would have maybe not have gotten what he needed. So you do, like, there's all these reasons why, you know, parents do what they do and why they try all these different things. And that's why Bobby did. But at the end of the day, we're just trying to look for a good fit for our kids. And it's not always perfect. And there's a lot of things going on. But this particular mandate is not voluntary. You don't have a choice. And in order for kids to go back into the classroom, we have to be in a situation in our counties and in our school districts where we have 14 days of declining COVID. So that, I don't know how I don't see it go down.
Yeah, you know, I'm glad you mentioned that because I did forget to say that. Yeah, that's the thing. You know, we don't have a say this time. And one thing I think that's interesting that you brought up in the last conversation we had was about teachers actually going into their classrooms and doing live teaching from there. You know, if that's a possibility. Now, I know there are some teachers that have their own young kids at home and may not be able to do that. But, you know, I think there might be some teachers who would enjoy that, you know, get out of the house for a little while, go back to their classroom where they know that's their workspace. They can concentrate, hopefully have good Wi-Fi and be able to do that. But I think, you know, if we had numbers in a controlled place, I would have liked to have seen school districts being able to customize things a little bit more. Like, I think the parents who are essential workers that have to go back to work and leave the house, unlike me, maybe their kids should be a priority for opening up campuses. Let's open up campuses, a few of them for certain grades, for people who really have to go back to work, nurses or doctors, or even just, janitors and people who have essential jobs that are important, and keeping things clean are more important than ever right now, and be able to maybe help their kids as like an on-demand kind of basis. So
Yeah.
I don't know, just some things I had thought about and some discussions I had with other parents about being able to do things like that, possibly.
We should put together a list of suggestions for school districts. This is July. And so we still have some input as parents about what the online curriculum and delivery should look like and could look like. Personally, if I was a teacher, I would want to do the live instruction from my classroom, just because it's familiar to them. It works for me for delivering what I need to deliver. It would keep me accountable. And it would be, quite frankly, a way to, like you said, to get out and have, feel like you're still, part of the universe, because it does get hard to be at home. But I hope that districts will have very, really, really careful and deliberate conversations about what it is that they're going to do in August when kids start, and how they're going to make sure that everyone has access. Because again, just not having a computer is like one thing, but making sure that they have the hotspots, making sure that they have all the other things that they need.
And headphones so they can hear all the things we talked about.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's going to be unprecedented for sure. I don't know. I really feel bad. There's a lot of parents that are really struggling and are going to have a hard time because they don't have an option to stay home.
Mhm.
If they stay home, they're going to lose their homes. They're going to lose their vehicles. They're going to, can't pay the bills with.
Well, I think that's places for our government, and our leadership needs to step up a little bit more, and try to make these accommodations, because we are in unprecedented times right now.
Yeah.
And so we need to think, and I think I love the direction that Bobby Joe was about to go in. It's like, we have an opportunity to rethink what education is, what public education is. And I don't think it's a coincidence that this is all happening. It's forcing us, for many advocates like you and I, it's like we've been wanting something to change, and we've been pushing for reform, because we know that schools as is, we're not serving students to begin with, right? And so now we have this, and we know that those kids that were suffering the most are suffering even more now, the underserved populations. And we surveyed parents, and the data came back to show that Black and brown kids were getting the least amount of time with their teachers. They got the least amount of live instruction, if any. SPED students as well, and EL learners were the students that were receiving the least amount of services, when they're the ones who really need the most. So I'm very concerned about how those children will be affected when we go back to school next month.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the other things that I think that we need to make sure that people are aware of is that there are a lot of kids in situations at home that are not the best of situations. We have kids that are in abusive households. We have kids that are struggling with anxiety and other mental conditions because they're at home.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not really doing enough to have that conversation about how are we going to deal with that. There's some kids in some dangerous situations at home, and now, like, they're not in school, which is their safe place. Normally, it's the place they eat. It's the place they escape from whatever they're going through. This is a thing, guys. I mean, this is real. And so it hasn't really been addressed.
Yeah, you know, you're right. It should be something that's being discussed more. And what options can we give those families? Can we have some kind of a hotline where if a child is, you know, dealing with something and they can call? Is there some kind of safe space or something that we can offer, even if it's virtual or over the phone? It's not in person. I would love to see more of those discussions happen, but we haven't even heard LA Unified discuss what virtual learning is going to look like. They're not even holding board meetings right now. They were up until about a week ago, and now they're taking about 3 weeks off where, you know, they're doing closed session meetings, right? And they're not going to come back until August 4th, I believe it is. So what's being discussed in that time? And that's why my organization has launched a social media campaign where we're using the hashtag Ask Parents. Ask Parents. And it's got this Hamilton theme where we're saying we want to be in the room where it happens.
Right.
We've only got one shot. Our kids only got one shot, and this is it. Hold a public, you know, board meeting and have a virtual discussion about this. Parents are ready to go down to Beaudry and protest because they're afraid that negotiations are happening right now, and they're going to come out and say this is what it is, and then it's going to be too late, and we're not going to have the opportunity to say anything like in the spring, and then we're going to be stuck with whatever agreement was made, which hopefully will be good, but I can't hold my breath for that.
Well, it historically, you know, has not always been, unfortunately. And I know LA Unified came out with San Diego with this big, you know, press release and made a big deal about stating that, you know, they decided they were going to go with virtual learning, they were going to go online. They were not the first district in the state to make that decision, but it was a big deal. And Austin Butner, you know, did this whole like press release thing. And the thing is that parents are not at the table. And so you have Austin Butner making a decision without the board. And then you have Austin Butner meeting with the UTLA
Days before. Yeah. Right.
So I'm not sure if I am okay with these like unilateral and arbitrary decisions by a superintendent. The reason we have elected officials and elected board members is because they're supposed to represent a constituency, which is parents and students. And I think they should be at the table, if nothing else. I mean, we already don't have parents at the table, but now you're excluding your board.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They definitely did in the spring with the side letter that they did. That was discussed just between Austin Butner and UTLA leadership. The board wasn't even included because it was considered an emergency situation. And so, you know, now they're discussing negotiations again right now. But again, parents are not at the table. I believe the board is at the table this time. I hope so. But this is why parents are talking about taking further action, because we don't want them to, again, come out with their unilateral decision saying, this is what's happening, this is what we're doing, and then it's too late for parents to say anything, even though we've been saying stuff the entire time. Like, hey, ask parents, ask us what we want, especially now that we're co-educators. Now we're just not parents off campus over here and you can do what you want. Now we're co-educators. You need to include us.
Yeah, I really think that there should be some more outreach to have parents, you know, come into the conversation, not just with LA Unified, but really with all the districts.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I didn't do any research to see what exactly it entailed, but in my district in San Bernardino, because it doesn't really affect me directly, unfortunately, I didn't look into it yet, but I do know that they're offering childcare for all ages up to 11 years old. And I'm not sure exactly what that means.
Me neither.
Or how that works. But, and I had hoped to get a board member on. Unfortunately, she was not available. But I'm going to find out. And then, you know, we're going to have to circle back and continue having these conversations, because
I think we should.
it's a really, really important thing, because people are going to freak out when August 14th or 17th comes and your kid is in online school and you have to go to work. And so what does this childcare look like? And are we the only district offering it, or do other districts offer it?
You know, I want to look into this a little bit more because obviously I remember when the governor first announced it, and now I am seeing some more conversations, especially online, about applying and what the process is. But I need to do a little bit more research myself so I can, advise people from what I know on that. And I definitely think that we should come back to this conversation because this is a fluid conversation and things are changing, daily right now. Tomorrow's Monday. Who knows what else we're going to learn from different school districts or the governor. So I definitely think that this is an important conversation that we should continue.
Yeah. And now the final thing I want to discuss is the more controversial thing, which is you have all these parents that are saying, oh, hell no, I want my kids in the classroom. And mostly it's people in the OC, but whatever. But what do you think about these people who are still saying, even despite all the things they've seen, we want the classroom to open to our kids? What do you think? I mean, what do you say to those people?
Again, and I know some of these parents because working with parents, I know parents that are more conservative. I know parents that are more liberal. I know parents that are in the middle. So, I do have to be
Political stance?
Unfortunately, I see that it is kind of a political thing. And that I guess that's why I mentioned that is because I see, and this is just from my observation, that the parents who tend to want campuses open and want to send their kids back are more on the conservative side. They're the ones that don't think masks are important and don't want their kids to wear masks and want schools to just open back up. And that's fine and everything if we had kept our numbers down. If you had worn your mask and social distanced and all that before and our numbers, we weren't going through a second spike and our numbers were down, hey, great. And you want to send your kids to school, that's your choice. And like I said before, I think it should be based on demand. I think it should be based on the parents who really need it and really need to go back to work, especially those who are essential workers, but not limited to that. And then the rest of us who are like, no, I'm keeping my kid at home and I can do that, like me, then they go ahead and they do that. But we're not even in a place where that can happen right now because our numbers are too high. And then the thing is, I think a lot of people, there's just so many people who are still doubting the virus. And that's a matter of, do you know somebody who has it or not? I find that people who don't know somebody or who are not connected to somebody who has it, like, don't think that it's real. I have a friend who's a mom at my daughter's elementary school. Our kids went to the same elementary school, and she just got out of the hospital.
Yeah.
And she's raising like 6 of her grandkids. She's actually a grandmother, and she did have some underlying health issues, but fairly young, and it hit her hard, and thank God she's okay. And thank God she's out. But do you have to know somebody in that situation before you start taking that seriously? Unfortunately, that's just what I'm seeing. And I hate that it's become a political thing because it should be a health and safety thing is really what it should be.
And these are your kids. I mean, these are our kids. I do know people who are currently in the hospital on a ventilator. One of them needs plasma desperately. I don't know what's going to happen with her. I mean, this is real, guys. But the thing that's selfish about these parents is, one, that they don't seem to mind that they're putting their kids in danger, because even though kids are asymptomatic sometimes and they haven't really had a lot of cases and kids are not dying, they still are carriers and they could have repercussions later. We're finding out now that it does things to the brain that we don't know. We don't even know what's going to happen later with kids that have it. But aside from that, we have children who live in generational households.
Yes.
And they are asymptomatic. So if they come home and they're sick and you don't know it, and then grandma gets sick because she's your child care provider.
Yep.
You know that.
That's a reality for many families. My grandmother doesn't live with me, but I'm taking care of my 91-year-old grandma. She lives about a half a mile from me. She has diabetes and asthma, and I don't want my daughter to go to school and maybe she's okay. She's healthy. She picks up something, I get it, and then I give it to my grandmother. These are the real life situations that are happening in people's families. And I've had stories of a 12-year-old girl at my daughter's school who was taking care of her 2 younger siblings because the parents were quarantined and they both had it. And one of the parents didn't make it. The father passed. He was a really well-known acting coach in Hollywood. So a father at my daughter's school passed. Thankfully, the mother was okay. But in the meantime, now they've lost their father and the 3 children were taking care of themselves. These are real life situations that I need people to understand, you
The
know?
other thing that people need to take into consideration is that when you put your kids in a classroom, you have to have staff, you have to have teachers, you have to have people, the adults in the room, and then you're putting them at risk. And a lot of our teachers are older.
Yeah.
They're not, you
Mhm.
know, so then if they get sick, this is a time where we have a shortage in teachers. And if
Yes.
we start getting them infected and making them sick, then we're just going to be online for the rest of till whenever. So I think, it's selfish. It's a selfish attitude. It should not be political. It should just be based on, whether or not, do you care about your peers? Do you care about your children? Do you care about teachers in the classroom? And the answer has to be yes. So I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, I hear you. And absolutely, we should care about teachers. We should care about, the staff that works at schools that are taking the risk, exposing themselves. They have, they might have their own underlying conditions. They have their own families. What about the daycare outbreaks that just happened, right? There was a couple of, right, about like, I
over
forget what the number
1,000
was.
kids.
Yes, from a
Yes.
daycare outbreak. And again, so if we're going to offer daycare, offer child, sitting services, which is great, but we have to make sure that we're doing things in a way that's as safe as possible, because these outbreaks are just going to keep setting us back.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know if we're ever going to be in the position to do it, but we should probably find a way to like test everybody.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it doesn't seem like the whole thing about having a fever is not always accurate. The relative that I know of that is having, and actually my cousin's father just died too. I forgot about that. But I mean, so many people are affected. Um, a lot of people don't have the fever. So it turns out when I was in Vegas getting my hand, up against the machine so they can test my whether I had a fever. Yeah, everybody doesn't get the fever. Sometimes
Right.
you have other symptoms that come up first, and then you get the fever after. So, I,
And that was another thing the superintendent for LAUSD mentioned, was being able, another reason not opening campuses is just being able to test people, and the amount of money that costs for a school district that is already financially unstable, as we know. And
yeah,
so they were looking at trying to get some outside company to offer it, but who's going to pay for that? Meanwhile, our president is saying if you don't open schools back up, you're not going to get the federal funding that comes. I mean, again, this is just all about us all not working together. Like, we're not working together. And I hate to like to sound so kumbaya and cliche, but it's so true. Like, parents need to be at the table, healthcare providers need to be at the table, teachers need to be at the table. We all need to be at the table working together, and not just say, oh, I'm not going to do this. And if you don't do this, all these ultimatums, that's not helping anybody. It's definitely not helping our kids.
exactly. Yeah. So we're gonna research some more opportunities and resources that exist in other districts, but definitely the number one thing that we need to figure out is how we can get parents who are working parents comfortable with the online learning and how they're going to deal with it, and then just make sure that we continue to stay safe, wear your mask, social distance, sanitize, because that's the only way that we're going to get back to maybe not ever normal, but some sort of normalcy, and have our kids back in the classroom if you want them to be. Because I honestly think that after this, it's going to have to be some kind of a permanent option to have online schooling.
I think so. I think regardless of, after this or whenever that happens, no matter what, I think public education is going to change after this. And I'm not upset about that. I think it should change. I don't want to go back to normal. I want to go back to I want to go to a place that's much more innovative. I want to be able to take ideas from other schools, schools like Bobby Joe's that she was starting to talk about, and hopefully she could come back and talk about that more, to schools like my daughters who were not online, but, quickly switched over and did an amazing job with distance learning, even though they had no experience with it. So I just would love to be in a place where we could stop, thinking about the situation the way it has been and start looking at what it could be, by all of us just coming together with different creative, innovative, and effective ways to teach our kids. Because again, even before all this, we know one size fits all doesn't work for all kids. And Bobby Joe was saying that as well when she was looking into different options for her kids. I have a friend of mine who I told to check out and come and watch this. Her kids are in private school. And she's like, I'm not going to pay all this money a month for them to do virtual learning. Even if they do a great job, I could do that somewhere else. And she is an essential worker. She manages a nursing facility, for senior citizens. So she has to make sure her kids are staying safe because she can't get sick and then go to her work and go take it to them, right? So these are real life families. And she has several kids, I think 3 that are still in school and 2 that are older. And so she's looking at online options and has been reaching out to me for Connections Academy and some other different options that she's been researching. And then hopefully we can get Lexi back on our next time as well. And we can do a legislative update because things are happening with SB 98, which we've talked about in the past. And more people are talking about that. And I believe that 240 minutes, if that's accurate, would be included in the update of SB 98. So yeah, we'll definitely hopefully come back and continue the
Echo Sunday night version because we weren't able to go up yesterday, but we did want to make sure that we touched on the governor's speech and press conference regarding the cities. I will eventually put the 17 counties on the comments, but in the meantime, I think that what I'm going to suggest to the comadres that we have is for us to come up with a document of challenges and suggestions that we could submit to the powers that be that we know and work with, because we can.
Yeah, and many groups are doing that. Yeah, many groups are, and I think it would be good if we align with other groups that are doing that, just to have a more powerful collective voice. My organization has 4 clear recommendations they've been making to LAUSD. This group of parents I mentioned earlier, Concerned Parents of LA, CPLA, they've got some very clear recommendations and requirements that they're making as well. And we're all pretty much on the same page, but the more of us that can come out and do that, I think the better will be. So yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, and so if anybody ever watches this, we'll make sure that they put in the comments, what are your suggestions? What are your concerns? And we want to bring those forward. We have the ear of legislators. We have the ear of the Office of the Governor. We have the ear of various organizations. So we can bring that forward for you guys. So we want to do that. So thank you so much, Roxanne, for coming on. And I know this was like not a normal time, but I thought it was important to address it this week. And so make sure that you share this to everyone so that they can give us some suggestions and some concerns that we can bring.
I will, definitely.
And Bobby, if you're paying attention, if you're there, sorry we lost you, but your information was like totally valuable, and we definitely want to continue that conversation with you and see where you guys are all at now. Okay, comadre, until next time.
See you next time.
All right, on the quest.